Studio Series 86 Megatron, God, I've been waiting a long time to say that, is a figure I'm really surprised has taken just this long to come out. Not just because of his memorable role in the movie, but also it has been so long since we got a new G1 Megatron mold. I mean, despite the extensive retooling, I am not going to credit Earthrise as its own figure, and Siege was a long time ago now. So I always expected this to happen one day, but it became evident when SS86 Prime came out that this was going to happen sooner or later. But it being one of the more generally anticipated releases of this year, does it meet the expectations that have been set for it? Well, let's take a look at them and find out. And to start off with, oh my god, the sculpted detail and proportions on this figure are sublime. I know that some people have had a bit of an issue with the silhouette of this guy. He's not broad enough at the shoulders, he's too boxy at the feet, but I love that look. It works excellently, not only for the G1 design in general, but also to go up against SS86 Optimus, which is a little bit boxier than he should be. I don't really know if I can word it right, but once you get these two up against each other, you see it. These are perfect foils to one another. And looking a little bit closer than just the general shapes of things, god, the sculpting is lovely. The shins go nuts on the detail. Greeble to hell and covered in all these vented details and little circular panels on the interior, I love that. The thighs and hip section keep it very recognizable but simple, although I do have to mention those pistol grip side skirts, they add so much to the look. But then the torso kind of half takes a step back to get a little bit more simple around the chest panel, but goes insane in the midriff. That abdominal control panel on those vents have never looked better in Chug. And that pectoral slab, while maybe looking a little bit overly clean, does have some nice greebles at the edges. The arms though bring back all of that detail that was in the shins. They're so much more greebled, but I kind of appreciate the look of it. Makes me think of panels like the chest being larger, heavier armor. I don't know, I'm into it. And I do appreciate the overall shape of the arm, especially those little hammer shoulders. And then the head is pretty great. It's very recognizably G1 Megatron, although I will say it might be about 10-15% taller than it should be. Yeah, it doesn't ruin the look or anything, and it definitely matches the proportions that the rest of him has. He's a very tall boy, but it's just not quite on point. But that is only one of a very small number of visual critiques I have with this guy. And trust me, I do have them. You know, the insides of the shoulders are a little more hollow than I'd like, and I do find the arms might be a tiny bit short, but I'm not splitting hairs over it. You know, this thing does just look fantastic in robot mode. Not only thanks to all the detail, but just how clean it is. There's no kibble. There's like these tiny rectangles off the tread kibble which are so well worked into the design that I barely notice them. It's live-withable, and that is the only kibble that is here. This figure is just damn near perfect visually. There is just kind of maybe one extra problem that I have with it, and that's in the deco. And no, I'm not going to complain about the plastic colors used here. I'm more than happy with these various shades of grey. Even the shins, which might be a little bit off model but work really nicely for the design. I'm not going to complain about any of that. Instead, I am just going to make note that some of the painted details aren't applied the cleanest. Particularly the reds, they just bleed a little bit more than I'd like. But you know, that ain't taking me out of anything here. This is still a really good looking piece. Not quite spot on visually, but I can confidently say that I love this. As do I love the accessories. These are really great. Now, if I remember correctly, I think at the reveal of this figure, a lot of people were quite indifferent to the fusion cannon. People were saying that there was something off about the design of it, and I do think that the block in the middle might be a little bit stumpy, but that aside, I think this looks fantastic. The sculpting's on point, that little red detail's on there. Can even take some blast effects if you like, and of course, it does wonders for the design. But you can't call a G1 Megatron design finished without the back barrel. This piece is pretty nice, it has some decent sculpted detailing on it, and of course you can just plug it on the back and oh yeah, that does it. That is a Megatron at his best. And honestly, I'd be happy if the figure's accessories stopped here, but there is a little more in the box. He comes with the sword that, spoilers for a 39-year-old movie, he used to kill Optimus with. It's got some really nice paint on it. It is a little bit scary to get in his hand, but it does look really nice once it's in there. Unfortunately, there's no gun to complete the look, although what do you bet that's going to come with 86 Blitzwing? Instead, to pad out the last accessory spot, he comes with a little mini version of himself, which I much prefer him having. Even if there is a little bit of paint bleed on this guy, the actual sculpting of it is really nice. And it has the clearest tiny Decepticon badge I've ever seen. And yes, you can give it to him to hold, which is kind of funny, but it makes much more sense with this conniving bastard. God, I can't wait to get the 86 Seeker mold. And if you want to, you can store the gun and the sword on the back. The only thing that's absent from here that I wish he had was the mace, but even then, I'm not going to split hairs over it because he's got so many good things. You know, the fusion cannon and the back barrel are mandatory in my opinion. There was no skipping them, he is not Megatron without them. The gun mode is a really nice inclusion, especially considering he can't turn into a gun. And if they only had the sprue space to add one more accessory, I'm glad they chose the sword. Especially considering he has the poseability to really make it work. The head is on a pretty unrestricted ball jump with a lot of wiggle room. There's forwards and backwards butterflies, and you can disengage it to get it to go even further forward. The shoulders move out pretty standardly and can go all the way around. There's bicep swivels, pretty deep elbows. There's ball joints at the wrists, which give you a decent amount of wiggle room and a swivel. The fingers can articulate with an index 3-finger split with 2 knuckles. There's a waist swivel. If you move the side skirts out of the way, the hips can move out pretty standardly and forward and back really far. There's thigh swivels, slightly above average knees. The feet can point up, down, and there's pretty good ankle pivots. You know, this might be one of the most posable chug figures I own. Definitely top 3, all of which have Megatron in the name. I expected this guy to be about on par with 86 Optimus, but the extra ranges he has at the hips, the elbows, the knees, the extra joints in the feet, they all just make him so much more agile. I was shocked out of the box by how well this thing moved, and by how solid it was, except for one thing. The knees, especially the right knee, were very, very loose. Very nearly ruined my first impression of this guy, but fortunately, all it took was getting some kikis in there and he's now fine. But it's still annoying. But that is genuinely the only fault that I can find in this guy in the playability factor, especially when you get to the transformation, because this is fucking wild. The main process here is probably way more complicated than it needs to be, but it works so well. I will say that getting some things either plugged in or unplugged is a little bit more difficult than it should be, like that first stage of the butterfly joints. But everything after that just unfolds 2 or 3 times more than you'd really expect it to. There's tabs that come out of nowhere and plug into places on the other side of the figure. It's nuts. Evan Brooks, Yu Yao Nishi, what were you smoking when you designed this? Can I have some? I can never quite get the feet to tab in though. That's a little annoying. And the tank mode is 70% fantastic. The main body on the side with all that tread detail that came out of nowhere. The actual chest plate making up the panel on the front. I absolutely adore it. Even the rear end, while not exceptionally detailed, is pretty nice. And it hides the robot parts pretty well. It also made me notice the strange use of black pins on this guy. I've never seen that before, but you know what, it works. The only issues I can really find with this tank mode are in the turret. Yeah, it's a little on the ugly side. The arms becoming the sides of the turret around the fusion cannon is not a new affair, and it's not something that I'm ever gonna not like. This aesthetic has just screamed Megatron for the entire time I've been collecting. It's fine by me. But I know that it annoys some people that it's not one consistent block with the turret coming out of it. It's definitely going to be down to some personal preference. And you know, it does have a little bit of functionality. There's some plastic wheels so we can roll alright. There's plenty of ports on the go so you can plug the accessories on. The only thing that I will call out and say that's not great is the fact that the axis is so far back on the rotation. That's not brilliant, but you know, at the very least, it does something. And it's a hell of a lot more solid than Age of the Prime's Megatronus was. And that does take me back to the conversation that was going on right around the time that this guy was revealed. And I'm so glad that this isn't a Megatronus retool, because this does so much differently, more interestingly than that did. Don't get me wrong, that is a great figure in its own right, but that is fulfilling a very different brief. That's a big, chunky, simple toy, whereas this is a slightly smaller but much more intricate figure. It's the difference of a transformation that takes 30 seconds and a transformation that takes 90. And while I do have a soft spot for both approaches, I do lean a little more towards this one. And you know, there's always going to be arguments about this thing and whether it should have even existed or not, let alone be an 86 figure, because yeah, it doesn't turn into a gun. But it is still, in robot mode at the very least, the most accurate G1 Megatron that I've ever seen at Mainline. And I absolutely adore it. And if you think you're going to enjoy this guy just as much as I do, then please leave a like. Or feel free to leave a comment, tell me what you think of this figure. And be sure to subscribe for the next one. No matter which of the things I've got coming next week arrives first, it's going to be a decent one, so stay tuned. But if you want to catch it early, then my Patreon is always an option, where you get early access, photo galleries, you name it, the credits, the whole works. Right now though, I'm going to go try and kill a Hive Lord, so please excuse me while I go do that. Anyway, ciao.